Student dorms are not known for their abundance of creature comforts. As I understand it, most are just one level above a third world prison cell in terms of cleanliness and living standards. Nevertheless, I do not believe my experience with a dorm was a typical one. Allow me to set up the scenery. The year is 2010. Yours truly is a young lad aspiring to become a mathematician who has just been accepted into a rather prestigious university in a faraway town and has been entrusted to a dorm by his overbearing mother and uncaring father. The owner was an aging lady with a silver tongue, impeccable etiquette and impeccable makeup. Turns out, as I learned later, this was her third attempt at running a dormitory, her previous two ventures having been closed down by the authorities for reasons which were to become clear to me later. Still, she had managed to get her license back through a combination of personal connections and bribery. In fact, of the 7 people with whom I shared a room, 2 were residents of her previous dorm to whom she owed money due to the aforementioned closure, and she let them stay for free. Her son, I was told on good authority, was hopelessly addicted to narcotics and had stolen the funds from her previous operation and run away. It is also worth mentioning that while she owned the license and ran the dorm, the buildings which served the purpose of the dormitories were owned by someone else from whom she rented. The dorm mother, or in this case father, as his gender was decided to be male by the good Lord of creation, was hopelessly addicted to crystal meth, and I mean full facial deformity level of meth addiction. He also served the role of the handyman. Obviously, he was frequently in no state to run the dorm and would walk the grounds aimlessly in the dead of the night instead. I recall feeling sorry for his long-suffering wife and innocent son who were affected by his condition, and the fact they probably knew they would see him die of his addiction. I still remember the time the owner asked him to install heaters. He turned up at 2:30 in the morning, high out of his mind, and tried to turn a straight piece of piping into an L-joint by unraveling it, wrapping fine wire around it, and banging on it with a hammer. At 2:30 in the morning, as a roommate was sound asleep next to him. Surprisingly, this did not wake him up. Finally, he settled down with a cup of tea and started telling stories of a war he was much too young to have any concrete memory of, let alone have participated in. My new living quarters were not the most hygienic. The sleeping arrangements consisted of bare metal bunk beds straight out of a prison cell. These were topped by mattresses, the likes of which you would only find in the most irreputable drug dens, and constantly smelled like somebody else's bodily fluids. What was worse, they were riddled with bedbugs. After just 4 months of living in those wretched arrangements, my legs were full of bug bites up to my knees. The scars would remain there for years to come. But what was even worse, the bloody place was full of cockroaches. And I do not mean in dozens or even hundreds, but in tens of thousands. These were not the big, flying kind, but were those pesky, tiny, non-flying ones that rarely get into the creases of cabinets, tiles, and every other conceivable place a creature of its kind could possibly fit in. Sometimes my morning coffee was interrupted by my finding of a cockroach in it. Other times, they would crawl up your leg as you were sitting on the toilet. Sometimes they would walk all over the dishes, sending my OCD case roommate into a blabbering fit. Other times, one would wake up in the middle of the night, only to find one has found his way up one's ear or down one's throat. You could open one of the rickety old lockers the place was provided with, and a dozen or more came running out of every metallic fold. You could put your hand in one of your pockets, and you sensed something slimy rub against it. To your horror, you would realize that one has found its way inside your pocket. What was even worse, they continued to multiply by the day, and this continued until the situation finally got out of hand. could no longer live in the bloody place. After what was probably the 10th time we complained to the manager, she finally sent the meth-addicted handyman over. He finally showed up 2 weeks later, at 1 in the morning, high as the metaphorical kite, shaking like a leaf, with a broken cigarette in his mouth, and tried to kill the multitude cockroaches by slapping them with a slipper. That's right. The man was so high out of his dear mind, he took up a slipper and started banging around with it, trying to kill the thousands of cockroaches who were too quick for his meth-addicted brain with a slipper. No poison, no spray, no powder, just an old slipper. Predictably, that didn't work, so he just gave up and left. Most of us were too poor to afford renting, so we had to live with the cockroaches. After a while, we decided to take the matters into our own hands, so we pooled our money and bought a few cans of bug spray. We sprayed the place to the best of our ability, and the situation was somewhat alleviated. But a good 10% of the cockroaches survived our attempts at genocide, and we somehow learned to live with them. I used to be a very studious fella. Every day I would go up to our uni's study hall and mull over algebraic structures, metric spaces, and topologies, consuming copious amounts of coffee in the process. I used to carry a small library of books in a large fake leather bag. Every day I would fill the small coffin of a thing to the brim and then some more, and study to my heart's content. One day I climbed up the usual stairs, took my usual seat, and proceeded to do the usual, when suddenly an ugly brown cockroach crawled out of my bag and went into the crack of one of the desks. This grotesque invader was soon followed by 2 more, each of whom found his way into a hole in the study hall. A couple of months later, they had to close down the whole thing, and the pest control people had to spray it all over to stop the infestation I had inadvertently caused. And that is how I led the cockroaches to our university. They never fully got rid of them. Months pass. The nice lady who was in charge of the dorm neglected to pay the rent. We were kicked out unceremoniously. I managed to get myself a flat somewhere. It was not without its flaws, but I managed to live it up while I lived there. Until one day I woke up to find myself surrounded by tiny, dirty cockroaches. They were crawling all over the place, in and out of cracks in the walls, all over the cabinets, and under the carpet. To my horror, I realized I've brought the cockroaches to my new dwelling.